Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Townsquare Tableau. I'm Vin Ebenau from the WOBM Newsroom here with Alicia Cook, Tom's River native and author of Stuff I've Been Feeling Lately, here to announce the release of another project coming out soon. And we're going to dive into the specifics of what it's all about and where you can go to find it. So Alicia, welcome.
Hello.
Welcome to the WOBM studios.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. I wanted to get started first. Just a brief introduction about who you are, where you're coming from. So tell me a little bit about Stuff I've Been Feeling Lately for those who may not know, and kind of how you got started on this writing journey.
Okay. Well, Stuff I've Been Feeling Lately is my best-selling book of poetry that was released January of 2016. It went on to be a finalist in the Goodreads Choice Awards. It's actually going to be traditionally published by Andrews McMeel Publishing in April, double the size of the original, the first edition. I started writing at a very young age. I've always been able to express myself better with words, obviously, than speaking. And my writing just took off thanks to social media and people sharing my work, and I'm very proud of Stuff I've Been Feeling Lately, but a true passion of mine is my series on addiction called The Other Side of Addiction, which focuses primarily on what the family members go through while their loved one is battling addiction, specifically heroin. That series started in very early 2015, and now that it's 2017 and it's been read about by 1.2 million people, the series, I figured it was time to compile them into a book and release that. There's some things exclusive to, which we'll get into later, but I think it's time, I thought it was time to get all my thoughts and everything that's been happening, especially here in Ocean County, and release a book.
Now, you were here a couple months ago back at the end of October, but like the 25th or the 26th, something like that, speaking in Tom's River, just as your documentary was about to be released on PBS, and just kind of based off that. But you know, inside of that were some of your conversations with other people who were affected by addiction. How does your story, and want to get into that a little bit, you know, just kind of like your story with losing your cousin Jessica to an overdose just about 11 years ago now, and your interaction with other people, how has that impacted your own viewing of this in any way?
Well, I was very young when I lost my cousin Jessica to a heroin overdose. That was in 2006, so we are past the 10-year mark at this point. So I never had a chance to stereotype who I would believe is using drugs, addicted to drugs. So I never spoke out of school about who could be affected by the disease of addiction. I knew right away from a young age that it was truly non-discriminatory, and if drugs could take over my cousin Jessica, who was a high-achieving student in extracurriculars, you know, what we hear over and over again now by families, I knew if it could affect her, it could affect everyone, anyone. And I started writing about addiction because I lost my cousin. I did it as a way to heal, because I believe words, as much as they could tear people apart, they could bring people together. And then I started posting my writing about my opinion on addiction online, and family members reacted. Not my family, family members of other children that were battling addiction at the time reacted immediately. I think my first piece I ever released in my series went viral overnight. So once that happened, I knew, I said to myself, people need to read more about this. Not statistics, though, obviously I support my work with statistics, but not just hard news, just really a human interest point of view on addiction, about what happens to the family as your loved one is in the throes of addiction, and the downward spiral and inevitably the death of a loved one. That wasn't really being spoken about much, at least by writers. They were just reporting the news over and over and over again. But reporting the news, for every drug addict out there, there is at least one person that loves them who is and will be affected if something happens to them. So that's really my cousin Jessica, the genesis of my series is because of her and our relationship. We were very close, had a lot of similarities, and I just started writing it to work out why this had to happen.
Now, inside this new project you have coming out, this new book, you kind of talk about some of these essays or these interactions you've had with other people. So tell me a little bit more about what's coming up in this new book and the kind of conversations you had with these individuals.
The second half of the book is entirely dedicated to those who battled addiction and are now in recovery, be it short-term recovery, a couple of years, or long-term recovery, as long as 20 years in recovery. And I wanted to end the book, I wanted the second half to be about these people who battled this disease and came out the other side in recovery and now are doing something to empower other people who are not too far behind them, maybe even in the throes of addiction themselves. And these people in recovery have started organizations and have very large Facebook groups and have done just so many wonderful things that could only come from people who have been there in the shoes of the user. And I wanted the whole second half of the book to be devoted to that. So the first half of the book you hear from me and my thoughts, and then you hear from family members I've spoke to who love someone that is addicted to a substance or alcohol. And then the second half of the book you hear from the true warriors who hit rock bottom and came out the other side, went into recovery, and have so far stayed in recovery and are trying to do something with their knowledge that you only get, unfortunately, if you've been in it. And that's something I can't speak to personally because I've never been addicted to anything. So to have all these people willing to be interviewed by me, and I'm indebted to them because they made the book what it is. I speak to parents who at the time maybe lost their child a month ago, a couple days ago. They email me almost immediately because if they're familiar with my work, they want to jump into action and share their story because they want to hope that their story might help another family or make another family feel less alone. I spoke with a story in the book is I speak with a mother who is taking the 2 drug dealers that watched her son overdose and die to court. They're being tried for murder, homicide.
Wow.
One of them has already been sentenced, but has pled down, so he's going to testify against the other drug dealer. That being said, on top of that, I'm learning a lot in the book as I'm interviewing the same woman who is taking the drug dealers to court in Ohio. Her son, even though he overdosed and was an intravenous drug user, qualified to be an organ donor, and his liver was donated to a 57-year-old grandfather who happened to be in recovery for alcohol. So, in essence, her son has continued to save other people.
Wow. And
her activism now is hopefully going to make some moves in Ohio that's being hit really hard right now by the epidemic. I spoke to a military widow who they were both in the military. Her husband was a Marine, she was in the Air Force, picture perfect life, 2 kids, 2 little boys. He was injured right before deployment to Iraq, began pain medication, moved on to heroin, and died not too long ago in her bathroom while visiting her children. I spoke to a father, Peter, who lost his daughter, Nicole, and he emailed me an attachment out of the clear blue sky. I've never spoken to him, met him before, and he said, Alicia, all of our stories sound the same after a while, but they're all very different. And he said, please use the attached if you feel if it could help someone. I opened the attachment, not knowing what I was opening, and it was the eulogy he delivered at his daughter's funeral. And instead of a common eulogy where they might, blow over what actually happened to his daughter who overdosed and died, unfortunately, a couple days after, or one day after her 21st birthday.
Wow.
He attacked the epidemic head on, and he knew in that church were all her friends and peers, and he spoke to them directly and said, heroin is poison. It took over my daughter, it addicted her, and left us to bury her. And he used that platform at church to speak to the youth, to hopefully get through to some of them, or just create some kind of change, because no one wants to think that their child died in vain, for no reason other than they were using drugs and they passed away. So most families want to jump into action. I speak to a daughter who lost her mother. She emailed me originally 3 weeks after her mother died. Her mother died on the young woman's birthday. So not only does she have to go on in life without her mother, she's reminded on her birthday of all days that her mother overdosed and died. And now she went to school and she's working in the field of recovery, helping people in her state, get through things and stuff like that. So everyone that I've met that's directly affected by addiction wants to immediately jump into action and make some kind of difference in some way. And writing just happens to be my way of trying to ignite some change.
Now, being somebody who saw what addiction can do to your family and being friends, how do you feel that these other people who are reaching out to you and then moving on to doing similar things that you're doing, are they saying anything about how it affects their life, or how they're able to kind of move past
Yes.
the grief and onto kind of trying to help others?
Yes, and it's all in the book. And some of my interviews now are almost 2 years old, or if 2 years old. So what I did was, every single person I've interviewed that's in the book, I went back and I reached out to them again to get a 2017 update to see where they are now. Because a lot of time has passed between some of the interviews. They say that they're still in pain and they're still grieving, regardless of how much time has passed. But they said that their activism and them reaching out to other families that are in the same situation has helped them cope and move on. And they've created, support circles, and they just want to help people. So when I was thinking, I'm going to reach out to all these people I've interviewed to see if they want to be in the book. And I thought I was going to get a no, at least one no. And not one person I reached out to said, no, please don't print my story in your book. Everyone wanted it because they know that their story can change another's possibly. But it's all in the book how they go, whether it's grief counseling or Nar-Anon or what they've been doing to combat this heroin epidemic in their own way is all in the book. It's the book has a duality to it, because I write very emotionally, and that human connection is there, where families reading quotes from these people will say, I've said that before. It's nice to know that I'm not the only one saying it. But at the same time, there's a resource component to the book where I have a lot of footnotes and continued, recommended reading, and I have a glossary. If they don't know what the terms mean that I use, they could just look at the bottom of the page and see what I'm talking about. So it'll definitely inform families that maybe are at the beginning of this utter nightmare journey, and it'll also, I think, help families that are in the throes of it or past it, unfortunately, for better or for worse.
How do some of these recovering addicts, in your research, your experience, kind of stop? Is it just cold turkey? Is it leaning off? I can't imagine that being easy in any fashion.
Just from what I've spoken to, and again, like I said, the second half of the book, it's dedicated to those in recovery that I've spoken to. So, even people that are maybe battling addiction in secret or feel lost, the book might help them, because they're going to read stories of. I talked to Matt Mendoza, who is the founder of Addiction Unscripted, which is in my humble opinion, the best online resource. It has the largest Facebook group for recovery, which is all proven in the book. But he, at one point, now he's clean, has been for years now, but at one point he was picked up by the police at the Mexico-U.S. border and put in federal prison, where he had to detox cold turkey in jail.
Ooh, wow.
He made it out of that. That was his bottoming out, but he made it out of that, and now he is this huge force of nature in the recovery community. I'm lucky to know him, and if I would like to think if those stories, it's one after another. I speak to Lara, who has a connection to Addiction Unscripted as well, but she was in and out of psych wards and homeless, and she went from having a 6-figure salary to being in her car And now she's out on the other side in recovery as well. I speak to so many people in recovery that every story is different. But if I had to say, to answer your question, usually a rehabilitation program, a hospitalized detox facilitated them getting clean. Especially, I speak in the book about Xanax, about how you cannot, it's definitely not recommended to stop Xanax cold turkey because it could result in death and seizure. You have to wean off of that. So most of the recovery stories that are in the book involve a program that really spoke to them and really worked for them. And then, honestly, 12 steps and God is a lot of what I hear. They bottomed out, went through a program, continued with the 12 steps and working the steps, and found God. And that's how they're able to maintain their sobriety. But they don't lie to me. They tell me that every day is a battle. Every day they have to decide, I'm not going to use drugs today. Because no matter how long they've been clean, there's still that little voice in the back of their head after a rough day or something sad happens where they think, I won't have to feel anything if I use. And they have to have smart feet and walk in the right direction. And that's a term that I've been hearing a lot in the recovery community. I have smart feet, where you take one step towards the right direction instead of taking a step, backwards.
Back in the wrong direction.
Yeah. But 12 steps in God is literally, for the long-term recovery, that's what I've been hearing just in my own research.
In Prosecutor Coronado, I think it was a couple weeks ago, there's a program right now in Ocean County, it looks like which I believe he hopes grows. I think it's Brick in Manchester that you head over to the police department if you're a drug dealer, hand over your stash, and then you go right into rehab and not face any criminal charges.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that kind of a program, and do you think that would work? And maybe not necessarily the drug kingpins of the world, but those who are dealing drugs and get caught.
At this point, the situation's so dire, we cannot get ahead of this epidemic. Coronado actually said recently that we're already trending in 2017, we're only 26 days into the new year, and we're already trending for 300 deaths due to drugs this year in Ocean County. And so at this point, I'm willing to try anything. I spoke at Mendham Middle School, 7th and 8th graders and their parents, and they have this new initiative called Not My Kid, because that's what parents in denial usually want to say, well, that wouldn't happen to my kid. Where statistics are showing now, it can very well happen to your kid. Where the school has the parents sign a parent-child contract, where if their child's name is pulled at random at the school for a drug test, the parents are agreeing that they will drug test their child at home, and the school sends them the drug test. Just because Mendham Middle School apparently has Mendham High School has a really bad problem. So now they're trying to they had me in the middle school. So I used some of my book royalties from my poetry book to donate 2 years worth of drug tests for this initiative, because it sounds a little radical when people think about it, even though it's voluntary and it's between parent and child. But anything at this point is worth a shot to me. So decriminalization for users and drug dealers, I am open to. But there are some drug dealers out there that are not addicted, and they're doing this to make money. To solely just make money. There are drug dealers that are on, court-ordered, a court order to not use, and then they're still dealing. So I'm open to decriminalization on a case-by-case situation. Some drug dealers are as sick as their clientele, and they're selling to maintain their own habit, and and it's just very sad. So in those situations, yes, absolutely. If they are addicted themselves, give them a shot at rehabilitation. But if they're not, and they're just selling drugs and perpetuating the ever-growing problem we have here, then we need to, rehab wouldn't help them if they're not using. So then, we have to charge them.
Now, I actually wanted to go back a little bit to the difference between addicts, drug dealers, especially the kingpins. I had spoken to Tom MacArthur a couple weeks ago following the Ocean County Mayor's meeting, about a bunch of different issues, but specifically on drugs. He said, sometimes jail wouldn't be the best option for addicts or some of these drug dealers, but he said some of the major kingpins, should be put in jail. You talked about addressing border security with the amount of heroin and methamphetamine and coming across the southern border, specifically from the DEA. What do you think is the best solution for drug kingpins? I mean, and these major drug dealers, is the one and only solution, you feel, prison and that's it, or do you think there should be some sort of rehab while they're in prison?
Well, the question is, do they need rehab? Or are they just sociopaths that are capitalizing? Because, talking about controlling borders and everything, that where the drugs are flowing, but again, going back to the genesis, it's the pills. They're in our country. And the genesis is we gave them a market. It wouldn't be flowing how it's flowing if we didn't give them this market, which started due to overprescribing or thinking you could steal a couple pills, use them recreationally. Then all of a sudden it's anywhere from $20 to $80 a pill on the street once it runs out, depending on the milligram. And then one day you can't find pills or you can't afford it. Well, here's a bag of heroin. It's $4, and it gives you a longer, more insane high. And look at all the money you're saving. But no one could use heroin recreationally. Very quickly you become addicted and sick and start on this downward spiral where I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So I'm not a politician. I'm not in Congress, things like that. But this is just from my opinion. I think the kingpins, the higher-ups, if rehab isn't necessary, I mean, some of these people should go away for a very long time, because it's just all about, we're already on fire and they're just dumping gasoline. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not even a drug user, and I know right now that I could go on Route 36 and pick up if I wanted to.
Now, I even spoke with MacArthur, about some of the overprescribing. He said it needs to go down to 5 days. It looks like Governor Christie's getting in on that as well.
Yeah, I just read that.
For some of the, addicts that are either trying to get out or just looking for their next fix, and are going to the pharmacy counters, and they can't get over the counter stuff, so they're breezing through the pharmacy store and picking up Tylenol or whatever, and they're getting that to get their fixes. What would your advice be for those addicts who are getting that fix because they can't get anything else and are trying to get out, and for those who aren't even thinking of a way out, they're just thinking of a way to get their next hit?
I mean, in a perfect world, the answer I've been hearing a lot is, ask for help. There's so many resources out there right now. There is decriminalization where you can come forth and not fear, prison or charges. But at that point, addicts are so sick that they aren't thinking about recovery always. They are thinking about the next high. And that's when intervention and intervening has to come in, specific at first with families. So I don't like giving advice to those that are using, because I've never been in their shoes. I wouldn't wish to be. I don't know what that's like, but speaking with everyone I've spoken to, it's rock bottom, where at one point they're scavenging or stealing to support their habit, and I've spoken to people that said, like, I wish I could just die because that's the only way out of this addiction. So hearing that, I say that's not the only way out of addiction. Whether you're in active addiction or recovery, you always consider yourself a drug addict, but you can find recovery. And these days, more so than in the past, there is so many resources and people reaching out their hands to help people.
I just have one final question to kind of bring it home. Mm-hmm. Seeing this other side of addiction, not using yourself, but watching it as a family member, and for other people who are watching it as friends and family members, what's your advice to these family and these friends that are watching one of their loved ones or one of their friends go through the struggles of addiction, and how can they help, without, trying to get flustered because maybe the addict is refusing help, saying, no, I'm fine.
Right, which is common.
Yeah.
The first thing I would tell families is you need to accept, no matter how hard it is, you need to accept that you cannot fix your loved one. You cannot love someone out of addiction. You cannot cure someone. They have to want it for themselves, and unfortunately, they have to go through, statistically, a lot of terrible things before that switch happens, before they hit rock bottom and decide, I can't continue on like this. Sometimes it never happens. They never find recovery. So my advice to families is just love them and remember that you're trying to save the person, even though you can't. You can't lose sight of who that person was before addiction took over, because once addiction takes over, a lot of times you might want to strangle that person and hate that person almost for what they're doing, not only to themselves, but to you and the people around them. So it's important to remember who that person was, which is why I write a lot about my cousin, because I want to remember how great a person she was, how funny and smart and witty a person she was before addiction took over, because that last day that I saw her alive, I didn't want to see her. My mother told me she was coming over, and I was mad. I didn't want to see her because I was mad at what she was doing to my aunt and uncle and our family in general, and how arrogant and in control she wanted to seem. But I saw her anyway, and I'm thankful that I did, because that was the one and only time we openly spoke about her addiction, and she seemed scared, and that's what piloted all this, because that was the day she told me, if I don't make it out of this, I want you to write about it, because it can't be for nothing. She was a writer, artistic as well. I spoke to Toms River East students today, and advice I gave them, because peers are usually the first people that know something's going on. And I told them not to confuse the definition of being a friend with being an enabler. And I said, when you see something, or if your friend tells you something, or even if you overhear something, you tell someone that could help, that could actually intervene and do something about it, because they're usually the first people to see a change in their friend's behavior, or their friends might be using in front of them because they think that it's no big deal, until it is. So I told Toms River East students today to remember to be a friend, and being a friend means you want them safe and you want them healthy, not you're going to hide their deep dark secret until, God forbid, they overdose, and then you live with that regret that you could have said something and you didn't. I also told them not to urinate for their friends. People are buying urine, clean urine, to pass drug tests to throw their parents off. Going back 10 years, when my uncle first got the anonymous call from a friend about Jessica, he then decided to drug test her immediately. She was only 17 at the time. She was still a minor. Drug tested her, came back clean. No, we don't have a problem. A couple months later, when she couldn't hide her addiction anymore, we had a problem. Turns out a person that called is a friend that said, we think Jessica's has a problem. An enabler, disguised as a friend, was urinating for her.
Wow.
Cost my aunt and uncle about 6 months of my cousin's life as a minor, where they could have really intervened, because once she turned 18, all bets were off. She was an adult. She kind of ran the show, unfortunately. So I just stress the importance of, if you know something, say something, because I would rather my cousin still be here and alive and mad at me for talking about what I talk about, than where she is now in Gates of Heaven Cemetery, thinking I was a friend because I never ratted her out. I made sure that if I ever knew anything, I would tell my family. And towards the end of her life, she was annoyed with me at times. But I'm able to sleep at night. So you can't fix someone, you can't love them out of addiction, but you could be there for them, and you could understand that being there for them isn't always being their favorite person. It's speaking up and doing everything in your power to try to get them on the right track.
Alicia, thank you for your time, and
Thank
you
you.
again for sharing your story with me and with all of us. So your book comes out next week?
My book comes out next week. It's called Heroin is the Worst Thing to Ever Happen to Me. Steve Rogers of PBS wrote the foreword. Congressman Tom MacArthur wrote the afterword, and it will be available on Amazon as early as Wednesday. of next week.
Excellent. Get the word out. Thank you for coming in
Thank
again,
you.
and thank you for watching another episode of Townsquare Tableau. That's Alicia Cook. I'm Vin Ebenau. Have a good one.